I have sat on the delegation bench of the Ennead Concord for 11 years, and in that time I learned to read a room the way a sailor reads weather. I could tell you, before the first voice ever spoke, whether a session would end in a treaty or a threat. The chamber told you. The 9 tiers rose in a ring around the floor like the inside of a great pale bell, each tier the seat of one of the ruling species, and when the Concord was confident, the tiers hummed with a low, satisfied murmur, a sound like wind moving through dry grass. That was the sound in the chamber on the day they voted to take our ships. I remember thinking, before anything happened, that they were very sure of themselves. I remember thinking they had reason to be. My name is Corwin Vess. I was 31 that year, a junior attaché in the human delegation, which is a grand way of saying I carried the ambassador's documents and kept the record and spoke only when spoken to, which was almost never. I was there to watch and to learn. What I learned that day I have never been able to unlearn, and I have stopped trying. The chamber of the Ennead Concord is not a dark place. People expect that when I describe it, they expect a cavern lit by torches, some grim throne room out of an old story. It is the opposite. The dome above the floor is a single vault of clear glass, kilometers across, and through it in the daytime you can see the sky of Ethon Secundus, the pale gold sky of the Concord's capital world, with its high thin clouds and its 2 small moons hanging like coins even at noon. The light pours down through that glass onto the floor of the chamber and gathers there, warm and bright, so that whoever stands at the speaking place stands in a pool of daylight, while the 9 tiers rise into cooler shadow around them. The Concord had built it that way on purpose, I think, long ago. It meant that the one who spoke was always exposed, always lit, always alone in the light, while the mass of the ruling species watched from the dimness above. It was a chamber designed to make a single figure feel small. Ambassador Neve Alcott did not look small. She sat on our bench with her hands folded in her lap and her back straight, and her gray coat buttoned to the throat, and she watched the Concord assemble with the patience of a woman waiting for a train. She was past 60 then, her hair gone iron gray and cropped short, her face all clean hard lines, and she had the particular stillness that I have only ever seen in people who have already decided something and are simply waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. I had served under her for 4 years. In 4 years I had never once seen her hurry. The Concord came to order. Archon Sethel of the Velu rose from the first seat on the highest tier, and the murmur of the chamber died away into silence. The Velu are a tall, luminous people, pale as candle wax, their heads elongated and smooth, their long fingers laced before them in the gesture of authority that their kind have used for 10,000 years. When Sethel spoke, the chamber's old translation stones carried the words into every ear at once, into mine, so that I heard the Velu tongue and understood it in the same breath, a doubling that never stopped feeling strange. The Concord recognizes the human delegation, Sethel said. The Concord recognizes Ambassador Neve Alcott of Earth. Let the record show that she is heard. She is heard, Neve answered, 2 words. She did not rise. It was a small thing staying seated, but it was the first small thing, and I saw a ripple move through the lower tiers at it. In that chamber you rose to be heard. She had chosen not to. Sethel let it pass. The Velu are too old and too proud to be baited by posture. The Concord has convened, the Archon said, to resolve the question of Earth. It has been 11 years since your world was granted an observer's seat among us. In that time the Concord has watched. It has weighed. It has read the record of your kind, your history, your wars, your appetites, and it has reached a judgment. I will not pretend to you that the judgment is kind. I did not expect kindness, Neve said. I expected a judgment. Give it. I want you to understand something about that moment, because I did not understand it then, and it took me years to understand it after. The Concord expected us to plead. That was the shape of every session I had ever watched between the Concord and a lesser species. And to the Concord, we were a lesser species, a young and violent people from a backwater arm of the galaxy who had come to the table 9 ships and no more. The lesser species always pleaded. They came to the light in the center of the chamber, and they argued and they bargained and they invoked their rights and their honor and their potential. And the 9 tiers watched them plead with the patience of the very powerful, and then the conquered decided whatever it had already decided. That was the ritual. Neve had just refused the ritual. She had told the Archon of the Ennead Concord to skip the ceremony and read the verdict, and she had done it in the flat, tired voice of a woman who has better things to do. Sethel read the verdict. The Concord finds that humanity is not fit to hold a seat among the ruling species, the Archon said. The Concord finds that your world is unstable, your intentions unproven, and your capacity for violence disproportionate to your standing. The Concord therefore resolves as follows. Earth's observer seat is struck. Your delegation is dissolved as of this session, and that the peace of the galaxy may be assured, humanity will surrender to the Concord's custody the whole of its fighting strength. You will deliver to us the 9 warships that comprise your registered fleet. You will deliver them disarmed, crewed only for the voyage, within the year. When the 9 are in our keeping, the matter of Earth is closed, and your people may return to the quiet of their own sky and trouble the Conquered no more. There it was, the lever set in motion. I felt the blood go out of my face. I had known the session would go badly. We all had. The whole delegation had spent 3 sleepless nights preparing for it, but I had not known it would go this far. The 9 ships. They meant to take the 9 ships. Those 9 vessels were, so far as the Conquered knew, the entire military strength of the human species. 9 warships, registered 11 years earlier when we first took our seat, entered into the Concord's great archive by our own hand, declared honestly and in full as the law of the Conquered required. 9 ships against a Conquered that could field 10,000. And now they meant to take the 9 and leave us naked under our own sky and call it mercy. I looked at Neve. She had not moved. Her hands were still folded in her lap. Her face had not changed at all. The murmur came back into the tears now, and it had changed its character. It was no longer the dry grass hum of confidence. It was something sharper, hungrier, the sound of a great crowd that has been promised a thing it wanted and is waiting to see it delivered. On the 3rd tier, the casques shifted in their seats, squat, broad, armored people the color of old iron, whose warriors had held the Concord's outer marches for 1,000 years. And I saw their leader, a scarred old veteran named Dosk, lean forward with his heavy hands braced on the rail, watching the human envoy the way a hunter watches a snared animal to see if it still has fight in it. The delegation may respond, Sethel said. And Neve Alcott at last stood up. She rose slowly, the way people her age rise, one hand on the bench for a moment and then not needing it. She stepped down from our bench onto the floor of the chamber, into the pool of daylight at the speaking place, and the light fell on her gray coat and her gray hair and her hard, clean face, and she stood there small and straight in the center of that enormous bright room with 9 tiers of the ruling species of the galaxy rising into shadow all around her, and she looked up at the first seat. "Let me be sure I understand the terms," she said. Her voice was quiet, but the translation stones carried it to every ear and the chamber went still to hear it. "You strike our seat, you dissolve our delegation, and you take our ships, all 9 of them." "That is the resolution," Sethel said. "And when you have the 9, Neve said, the matter of Earth is closed. We go home, you leave us be." "You have understood correctly, Ambassador." Neve nodded slowly, as if turning it over, and then she said the thing that I have carried with me for the rest of my life, though at the time it seemed to me the strangest possible thing to say, a surrender so complete it made my stomach turn. "All right," she said, "you can have them." I have replayed that moment 10,000 times. I have tried to find in her face, in my memory of her face, some flicker of the thing she knew and we did not. There is nothing. She said it the way you would agree to a small favor. You can have them. She might have been handing over a set of keys. For a moment the chamber did not know what to do with it. There is a particular silence that falls when a powerful body has braced itself for a fight, and the fight does not come. A silence with a stumble in it, an off-balance quality, like a man who has thrown his weight against a door that turns out to be already open. The Concord had prepared, I think, for defiance. It had prepared for the human envoy to argue, to threaten, to invoke whatever rights she imagined she had, and it had been ready to crush all of that beneath the weight of its 10,000 ships and its 10,000 years. It had not prepared for a gray-haired woman in a plain coat to simply agree. Archon Sethel recovered first. The Velu did not hold the first seat by being slow. "You consent," the Archon said carefully, "to the surrender of your fleet." "I consent to the surrender of the 9 ships," Neve said. "Yes, you'll have them within the year, disarmed, crewed for the voyage as you asked. I'll sign whatever needs signing." And she waited. Here I must tell you about the archive, because the archive is where it turned, and if you do not understand the archive, you will not understand what happened next. The Ennead Concord keeps a great record. It is the heart of the Concord's power, older than any single species that sits in the tiers, a vast and perfect accounting of every world and fleet and people within the Concord's reach. When a species is granted a seat, it enters itself into the record, its worlds, its populations, its resources, and above all its fighting strength, declared in full and true, on pain of expulsion. For the Concord's law holds that a lie to the archive is the one crime it will not forgive. The record is how the Concord knows the shape of the galaxy. It is how it weighs the strength of every people against every other, how it decides who may sit and who may not, who may be threatened and who must be handled with care. The record does not lie because no one lies to the record. That was the foundation of everything. That was the thing they were all so sure of. 11 years earlier, when humanity took its observer seat, we had entered ourselves into the record as the law required. And in the field where a species declares its fighting strength, the human delegation had written a single honest line: registered warships, 9. 9, it was true. It was perfectly, exactly true. We had declared 9 warships to the archive of the Ennead Concord, and the archive had recorded 9. And for 11 years the Concord had known humanity as the 9-ship people, the little violent species from the backwater arm with its 9 ships, hardly worth a seat, certainly no threat. Every judgment the Concord had ever made about us rested on that number. The vote they had just cast rested on it. Take the 9 ships and humanity is disarmed. Take the 9 and the matter is closed. But the archive records what it is told, and no one in 11 years, in all the weighing and the watching and the judging, no one in the Ennead Concord had ever thought to ask the question that a child would ask. No one had asked how many ships humanity had. They had asked how many we declared, and we had answered honestly, and they had mistaken the answer for the truth. I did not know any of this, standing on that bench. I want to be honest with you about that, because there were only 3 people in the galaxy who knew the whole of it that day, and I was not one of them, and Neve Alcott was one, and the other 2 were on the far side of the system with their hands on a great many switches. I knew only that my ambassador had just handed the Concord our entire fleet without a fight, and that something was wrong, because Neve Alcott did not surrender, had never in 4 years surrendered anything, and yet she was standing in the light of the Ennead chamber giving away our ships as though they cost her nothing. Then I saw it begin to trouble them, too. It began on the 6th tier, among the Ombric. The Ombric are the Concord's keepers of the record, a slender, gray-robed, many-eyed people whose whole purpose across 1,000 generations has been the tending of the archive. They do not forget. They do not overlook. And I saw one of them, an old archivist seated near the rail, go very still in the particular way of someone who has just heard a sentence and found a loose thread in it. She leaned to the archivist beside her and murmured something, and that one went still too, and then a third, and I watched the stillness spread along the 6th tier like frost across a window, one keeper of the record after another arriving at the same small, terrible question. How many ships does humanity have? Not how many did they declare. The record answered that, 9. But the record only ever answered the question it had been asked. And 11 years ago the question the Concord had asked was, how many warships do you register? And the answer to that question was 9, and it was true, and it had never occurred to anyone that the two questions were not the same. "Ambassador," said a new voice, and it came from the 6th tier. The old Ombric archivist had risen. Her many eyes caught the daylight and threw it back in little points. "A question before the Concord closes this matter. A question for the record." Sethel's long pale head turned. The Archon did not like the interruption, I could see that. But the Ombric are the keepers of the record, and even the first seat does not silence them. "The keeper may ask," Sethel said. The old archivist looked down at Neve Alcott, small and gray in the pool of light. "When your people entered the record 11 years ago," she said, "you declared 9 warships. The Concord has held you as a 9-ship people since that day. I find, looking now at the entry, that it is precise. It says registered warships 9. It does not say total, it does not say all." Her voice did not rise, but the chamber had gone so quiet that it did not need to. "Ambassador, how many warships does humanity possess?" And Neve Alcott looked up at her, and for the first time that day, something moved in the ambassador's hard, clean face. Not a smile, nothing so warm as a smile, but a kind of settling, the look of a woman who has waited a long time for the right question and has finally heard it asked aloud. "You never wanted to know that," she said. "In 11 years, not one of you ever asked. You asked what we would register. We registered 9. It was true. We have never told you a lie, your own law forbids it, and we kept your law better than you kept it yourselves. We declared the 9 you were willing to see, and you built a whole judgment on the 9, and you never once asked the other question, because it never crossed your minds that the number you were shown was not the number that was there." She let that sit. The chamber did not breathe. "You could have asked any year," she said. "You could have asked today before you voted. You voted first. You always vote first." I heard it move through the tiers now, the understanding, and it did not come as a shout. That is the thing people never believe when I tell them. It did not come as an uproar. It came as a silence that deepened, tier by tier, a silence that got heavier the more of them arrived at it, until the whole vast bright chamber was drowning in a stillness so total that I could hear my own pulse in my ears. The cask veteran Dosk had stopped leaning forward. He was sitting very upright now, his scarred old face turned not toward the human envoy but upward, toward the glass of the dome, toward the pale gold sky. Because that was the moment the light changed. I have tried many times to describe the way the light changed, and I have never gotten it right, so I will only tell you what I saw. The daylight pouring down through the great glass dome, the warm, ordinary daylight that had lain across the floor of the chamber all through the session, dimmed. Not all at once. It dimmed the way a room dims when a cloud crosses the sun, except that there were no clouds. The sky of Ethon Secundus had been clear and pale gold all morning. It dimmed in patches, in shapes, in long, dark geometric shapes that slid across the glass of the dome one after another, and the whole chamber turned its face upward to see what was casting them. They were ships, they were our ships. They came down out of the high sky over the capital of the Ennead Concord, in a formation so vast that no single eye could hold it. Kilometer upon kilometer of dark hulls sliding into the daylight, rank behind rank behind rank, more of them and more of them until the pale gold sky beyond the dome was a lattice of shadow, and the warm light on the chamber floor had gone cold and gray with the passing of them overhead. They made no sound that the chamber could hear. They did not fire. They did not need to. They only arrived and kept arriving, and the sheer accumulating weight of them pressed down on that chamber like a hand. Not 9. I do not know the number. I do not think anyone will ever know the true number because we never declared it and we never will. But it was not 9, and it was not 90, and it was not 900. It filled the sky of their capital world from horizon to horizon, and it went on filling it. And the 9 tiers of the Ennead Concord sat frozen in their seats under the cold moving shadow of it and understood, all at once and far too late, what they had voted to seize, and what they had left uncounted. The 9 ships were real. Every word we had told them was true. We had declared 9 and we had 9, and we would have handed those 9 over disarmed and crewed for the voyage exactly as promised, because Neve Alcott did not lie and neither did the people who sent her. The 9 were the honor guard. The 9 were the ceremonial escort, the ships we were willing to name, the honest small number we had set down in the record on the day we took our seat, set down knowing that a proud old Concord which asked only what you would register, and never what you kept, would take the small number for the whole and build its certainty upon it. We had not deceived them. We had simply let them deceive themselves, and we had waited 11 years for the day they would vote to act on it. Archon Sethel of the Velu rose in the first seat. The Archon's long pale hands were no longer laced in the gesture of authority. They hung at the Archon's sides. Sethel looked up through the dome at the dark tide of hulls sliding across the gold sky of the Concord's own capital, and then looked down at the small gray woman standing alone in what was left of the light. And when the Archon spoke, the voice that had opened the session with such calm certainty had gone thin. "You would not have surrendered them," Sethel said. "It was not a question. It was a man discovering the floor of the thing. You never meant to surrender anything. You came here to let us vote." "I came here because you summoned me," Neve said. "And I answered you honestly the way we have answered you honestly for 11 years. You asked for the 9. You can still have the 9. I gave you my word and my word holds. They'll be at your dock within the year, disarmed, crewed for the voyage. I keep my agreements." She let her gaze travel slowly up the 9 tiers, tier by tier, the way a person counts a crowd. "But the matter of Earth is not closed, Archon. It was never yours to close. You have been weighing us for 11 years against a number we handed you, and you never thought to ask whether the number was the whole of us. It was not. It was the part we were willing to show a Concord that votes first and asks after." She turned. That was all. She did not raise her voice. She did not make a speech. She did not tell them what humanity was or what we would do to them or what they should have known. She had said what needed saying and not one word past it. And now she turned her back on the first seat of the Ennead Concord and walked, unhurried, across the cold gray floor of the chamber toward the great doors, and the daylight through the dome was so choked with the passage of our ships that her shadow had gone faint on the marble. I remember the doors opening for her. I remember the sound they made, the deep sound of very old and very heavy doors, and I remember the pale gold light of the corridor beyond, ordinary daylight, skylight, spilling in around her small straight figure as she walked out of the chamber where the ruling species of the galaxy sat frozen in the shadow of a fleet they had never thought to count. I remember standing up from the bench to follow her, because that was my duty. I carried her documents, and I remember that my hands were shaking and hers had not shaken once. Behind us, the chamber did not erupt. I keep telling people this and they keep not believing it. There was no uproar, no shouting, no scramble. There was only the silence and the cold moving light and 9 tiers of the oldest and proudest powers in the galaxy sitting very still and looking up through the glass at the answer to the question they had never asked. We did surrender the 9. I want the record to show that because it matters, because it was the whole of the thing. Within the year, as promised, humanity delivered 9 warships to the dock of the Ennead Concord, disarmed and crewed only for the voyage, exactly as the resolution had demanded. Neve Alcott signed the transfer herself. The Concord took possession of the 9 ships it had voted to seize, and by then the taking meant nothing at all, because everyone in the 9 tiers had seen the sky, and everyone understood that the 9 had never been the fleet. The 9 were a keeping of a promise. They were the last honest gift of a people who had told the truth for 11 years and been mistaken for small the entire time, handed over freely on the day it could no longer matter, so that no one could ever say a human word had failed to hold. Earth's seat was not struck. In the end it was the Concord that asked to keep us at the table, and it was Neve Alcott who let them, on terms I was too junior to be shown. The delegation was not dissolved. I carried the ambassador's documents for 6 more years, And in all that time, I never again heard a tear of the Ennead Concord murmur with that dry-grass hum of certainty when a human rose to speak. They had learned the cost of asking the small question and calling the answer the whole. Neve Alcott is dead now. She died old in her own bed under her own sky, which is more than most envoys manage. Toward the end, I asked her the thing I had wanted to ask for years, whether it had been a trick, whether declaring the 9 had been a lie dressed up as the truth. She was a long time answering. She was always a long time answering. It was never a lie, she said. We told them 9 and we had 9 and we handed them 9. Every word held. She looked at me with those hard, clean eyes gone soft at last with age. We only ever let them count what they were willing to count, Corwin. A people that votes before it asks will always be surprised by the sky. That isn't a trick. That's just them, deciding what they wanted to be true and us letting them. I have sat on the delegation bench of the Ennead Concord, and I have learned to read a room. And the thing I learned in that chamber, under that dome, in that cold moving light, was this: the powerful are never undone by the strength you show them. They are undone by the strength they never thought to ask about. The number left off the record because no one wanted it there. The fleet in the high sky over their own untroubled capital, arriving in daylight, filling the glass, while 9 tears of certainty sat frozen and looked up too late. They had asked us for 9. We gave them 9. It was all we had ever declared. It was never all we had.